At the start of the war, we had news, through British government news in the cinema, which we didn't visit very often, but it generally gave the impression that the Germans were going to be extremely aggressive when they invaded a country. And the thing that we got from it was the Gestapo and the SS would in fact pry very deeply into anything they wanted to. Now that was in fact, they would arrive at your house, invade it, search it for whatever they thought that they needed or wanted to find out, question people, torture them if necessary and such like. So as young customers, we in fact, and most of us were around about 9 or 10 at this time. Some are not even at secondary school. We thought, well, what can we do? Now, we had one person amongst our core, Galt. Galt was very far thinking in his attitude to things, and he suggested to us all of an idea. The thing was that we would in fact try and defend each household on a personal basis. And, well, when I say that, what we meant was that we would try and make sure it was discomforting for anyone to in fact come into our property or our garden gate and such like. So he suggested that we all contribute some form of chemical. Now, our mind in chemicals was in fact, well, very remote, but he gave us an idea, like paraffin, salt, pepper, tar, so on. So I had, we had hens, and the immediately that ran to my mind, that hen pen, in other words, chicken poo, in its most fresh form. We had in fact things like urine, which came very rarely to hand, well, not to hand out, and we had bleach. I suppose we had soap powder and salt, and many other things like that, tar, creosote. I just can't think of all the things we had, but we had tins of paint, which in these days were inclined to go hard once it had lay a while. So we thought, rather than let it go hard, we would put that into another jar and do our best to keep it so that it was in a kind of liquid form. Now, the suggested way of application was, for instance, we would go round in the summer and put a little bit of tar onto every gate latch that was likely to be used by a stranger. Unfortunately, it meant our lot to go to get it too. Now, the only cure we knew at that time, well, I knew, and my mother thought was regularly used, was butter. If you got tar on your fingers, which we used to get quite regularly with the summer and the tar coming up through the cobbles in the street, for that's what was used to fix them. They poured this down between each cobble, and the cobbles I'm talking about were large. They would be about 8 inches by, say, 4 inches, and we used to sit and pick it out with a stick and play around with it and that. And while it was warm, it was very easy to play with, but when it came evening time, it stuck to your fingers, it chilled on your fingers, and then your parents would say, oh, come on, we'll have to get that off. Now, butter was rationed, and so by the time you got a quantity of tar on your hands, that was half of the ration starting to go away. What we didn't know at that time is paraffin or turpentine would more readily remove it, or petrol, which was a commodity that in fact was on ration. You need a driver's license to get a ration book for petrol and so on. So that was out with our particular thing, the petrol side. So Alec collected all this stuff in his Anderson shelter. Now, Anderson shelters were fantastic things for storing things, and some people saw it only as a last resort when they thought their house was going to get bombed. Now, if Alec's house was going to get bombed, his Anderson shelter was exactly the width of the path, which would be about 4 foot from his house. And we felt, well, okay, it might be protected with the house rather than the shelter being protecting the contents of the house or the people in the house. So Alec set about building a whole series of shelves, and we came around with all our various bottles of this, that, and the next thing. And he gradually built up a fantastic store of the chemicals. Now, we felt a lot of the time there was no need to use them. Bear in mind that if you were applying these things, you were applying them in such a way your own parents or self would in fact be in some way contaminated with them. So it was decided that we'd only use it once a threat became, well, say an orange or red threat is used nowadays to talk about things. It came to light that all this chemical was lying unused in Alec's shelter. So he said he was going to go into further experiments and see if there was other things he could use it for. So he came out one day and he says, look, I'm going to carry out a test. I've put some of this stuff on my wrist, and when I smell it, it makes my eyes water and my nose run. And I'm going to use it at school tomorrow. Now, in these days, we'd got to a stage that you probably only attended school a half day 1 week and an afternoon next week. Morning 1 week, afternoon next week. So he went to school, drew the teacher's attention to the fact that his eyes were watering and there was a possibility his nose was running. Teacher apparently commented that it smelled awful much like urine. Now that was a funny word for us. We could never get our heads around urine. We called it pee. Anyway, he came home and he told his granny that he had a cold, so she was right, that's fine, not go to school tomorrow. Now that was a bit of a problem for Alec because he needed fresh resources from his shed to maintain the effect. But anyway, eventually was allowed out with his granny, for that's granny and grandpa's who he stayed with. He came out and he told us of a success of that particular thing. So we all queued up to get a sample put on our wrist. Unfortunately, that was a Saturday it was used, so as a result, the only thing we could escape from was probably Sunday school. And the Monday, well, we were already at school before we in fact thought of getting a fresh supply. And it was easier for you if you were in an afternoon class to get a supply from Alec. That's assuming he wasn't in the morning class at school. So there was all these terrible problems to, in fact, engage with this. But we had the feeling that this was going to be successful. And it was continued to prepare. We'd done some rehearsals. Well, particularly neighbours who would object to us playing football in the street. Now, in these days, cars hardly ever passed along the street, and probably the only thing was a horse delivery van coming round. Now, that provided fresh material for us, and as far as the horses would occasionally leave deposits on the street, which in fact really was a sought-after material, horse manure. we'd all run into our house, grab a pail and a shovel and come out, only to find that some of our friends had already got there ahead of us. On one occasion, I saw a very large amount of manure next to a drain, and nobody spotted it, so I rushed in, got my barrow, we wanted to really get business with this, got my barrow and rushed out, and I was scooping it up. Now, what had happened between the horse naturally dropping it and a load of manure coming from a mounted policeman's stable, which was dropped partially onto their pavement in front of their gate. But some of the horse stuff was quite close to that, so I scraped it over and shovelled it into my barrow. I didn't take any of the policeman's manure at all, but his wife saw me, and the situation she was in, all she could see me was scraping at the back of this heap of manure. She came rushing out, grabbed my barrow and threw all the stuff onto her heap and told me that was stealing. I tried my best to explain to her that the fresh orange stuff was mine, but no, she was unwilling to in fact cast her eyes in that direction, so I lost my manure. It was really heartbreaking. But that is an idea of how we handled this effort to make sure a Gestapo man or SS man or anyone coming in to challenge our households or examine our property would meet with some form of opposition which would be unpleasant for them. Maybe I'll even kill them. You never know what a bite of tar, if you have had their dinner and there's some tar on their fork or something like that. Anyway, that's the end of that story. Thank you.